You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Wood.
And I'm Jennifer Connor.
From Equestrian Businesswomen, and you're listening to Equestrian B2B, the podcast that brings together industry leaders, entrepreneurs, and equestrians for conversations about how they build and sustain a successful business.
On today's show, we speak to Dr. Karin Bump about her pursuit for higher education, how education has impacted her career path, and how it relates to the equine industry.
Dr. Karin Bump is a passionate educator and change agent with a career trajectory including work in higher education, industry, and the not-for-profit sector. She has held frontline, middle management, and executive roles along with service as an invited speaker, facilitator, and trainer for other organizations. Her specialty areas are in business entrepreneurship and development, equine behavior and welfare, equine experiential education, educational assessment and program review, grant writing, and policy development.
Dr. Bump has had significant impacts in the state of New York. She has worked for Cornell Cooperative Extension, where she implemented Cornell in the Classroom initiative for CCE of Madison County. She was chair of the Cazenovia College faculty for 3 terms of service. During her time at Cazenovia College, she developed the Bachelor of Professional Studies degree in Equine Business Management. She is the co-founder of Saddle Up New York, Equine Academics and Equine Education Network, and founder of National Association of Equine Academics.
Are you an industry professional who has thought about writing a book? Bookending your business enhances credibility and creates powerful marketing opportunities. In-Course Publishing can bring your expertise to the printed page. As a hybrid publishing company, we partner with our authors through editing, designing, printing, and distribution. Don't leave opportunity on the shelf. Bookend your business today and let us bring your book into the unique arena of the equestrian market. Visit our website, incoursepublishing.com, to download a free PDF to help get you started.
So we're really excited to have you on the show today. I know we've met a couple of times, but had you on a panel at the Saratoga Women in Business Spectacular. And, you know, from there, we got more interested in the topic of higher education in the industry and how people could benefit from it. So we'd love to talk more about that and, you know, what you see, what you've seen and what you think could be best for people. So we're happy to get right into it.
So what made you to pursue higher education? Obviously, you're a doctor in front of it. So you've gone through some school. And what made you pursue it?
Yeah. So thanks for having me on. Really enjoy connecting with both of you. And the Saratoga event was lovely. And I appreciate the stuff you're doing with women in business. So for me, it's sort of an interesting story I like to share. I was not a great high school student. I was, a B-ish kind of student, was very active in lots of things, but was not, certainly was not a bookworm. My parents wondered what they would do with me, I think is the story they told me later on in life. And really had to push to get accepted into the University of Illinois. And did not know what I wanted to study. I knew it's sort of ironic. I knew I did not want to work with people and wanted to work with animals. And at the time, so this was quite some time ago, veterinary was like, it was veterinary or working in a barn were the only 2 things people thought of with horses. And there was like no way I was going to get into veterinary school. And at that time, it was largely men and you had to come from a farm, very different than it is today. So by the skin of my chinny chin chin, I got accepted into the University of Illinois in, of all things, ornamental horticulture. It was the only program I could get accepted in. It had the lowest of the requirements for the University of Illinois. My guidance counselor wrote a, "Please, we think she's got potential" kind of letter, and they accepted me. I went to college because that's what my sister did, and that's what my parents said, "Thou shalt do." And my life really changed when I took a general animal science course that was required, and a woman stood up who had a PhD in equine nutrition, and she taught a section on horses. And I went up to her afterwards and said, I want to change, I would love to have you as my advisor and change my major. And so I called home and my dad said, well, Pumpkin, what do you think you're going to do with that? Like I said, I don't know, but I know I'm going to be happy, Dad. And that was really the start of that for me. So my entry into my bachelor's degree program was really, this is just what you're going to do. And then what really flipped the lid for me was that class and that particular professor. And then as far as a master's degree, she was a very strong mentor for me. And she started having me help with some labs and help with some classes. And then I did some teaching assistant stuff and realized I actually really liked that. And she thought I was good at it. And so we started talking about a master's degree. I loved the research piece. And so I continued it in my master's with her. And through that, realized did a lot of graduate teaching. In fact, that's how my master's was paid for, was through a graduate assistantship. And then I didn't really want to pursue it. I knew I wanted to get a PhD, but I didn't know what I wanted to get it in. And so she was actually moving from Illinois to Kentucky, and I was finishing up my master's degree and got a great job, started applying for teaching positions. At that point, you could still do that with a master's degree and not a PhD, and got a great job, which I thought I would, do a couple years and go back to big institution, and stayed there for 28 years, fell in love with the students. So during my time there, I got really involved in volunteer kinds of things because I came from a land grant institution where, the mission is we give back, we do these things, it's larger, the community is larger than just, your network. But I went to a small private college, but I always had a big, big industry kind of perspective. Got very involved with the New York Farm Bureau, New York State Horse Council, probably even more so with Farm Bureau. Started doing some leadership with stuff with that. Got involved with policy agenda, policy setting, working with legislators, working with Albany, and loved it. And so from that, then decided that I wanted to go and do my PhD work at the University of Albany, where they knew nothing about horses. But I found, after a number of interviews with folks, found a great group of people that understood what I was trying to do and saw how horses could be part of it. So my PhD is actually in higher education and policy studies. So I did a sort of a very unique kind of combination there. And the motivation for that was really self-motivation. So, my bachelor's degree was pretty much thou shalt do it. My master's degree was a natural trajectory. And then the PhD was I was already a tenured full professor at that time, had been at the institution for a long time. But I really had a hunger to do some research in that particular area. And so that's what motivated me. So it's a very long, probably going to need to cut some of that somewhere, but it's a sort of a long trajectory of kind of thinking about, what that path was to higher ed.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really interesting because it seems like you really grew throughout the process, right? Especially coming from being a kid who wasn't great in school. Mm-hmm. What do you think helped you grow? Or was it that class? Was it that teacher? You said that kind of flipped the switch, but was there anything else?
So motivation is huge. And so for me, the motivation became the horses. So absolutely, that was the difference. And that professor was huge. I mean, had she not responded the way that she was, had she not taken me under her wing, I don't know where I would be with that. So education definitely changed me as an undergraduate student. Once I knew that graduate school was an option for me, I became much more motivated in studying to get the grades to get there. So I appreciate the challenge, and the challenge that is one that in some way you agree to. You're like, this is a challenge that's in front of me. I want to accept it and move along and kind of do that. And of course, teaching was huge. That really changed changed me and thinking of how I thought about things, how I explained things. Found out that I loved helping the students and that kind of nurturing piece. And then, of course, my analytical skills from doing research, really changed as well. Mm-hmm. Then I would say my PhD had the most change in me, professionally and personally. The level of work at the PhD level, from a critical thinking, problem solving, communication, designing your own research, really digging into literature, thinking very differently about everything that you're looking at and what that means and what could it mean. A huge difference.
It's so interesting how that one teacher can change things for people, right? Like,
oh yeah. It really, totally. Yeah, right. How they're there for the grace of God, go on kind of thing. You think, what would I do if it wasn't that? Or I also think about the parent piece. My father said, "What are you going to do?" But I'll support you. Had they said, "No, you're not going to do that," that would have been dramatically different. And so I used, as a college professor for years, I talked about that a lot. And, when parents would meet with me, and they'd often say, what is my son or daughter going to do with this degree? We know they're passionate about it, and being able to share my own story and then talk about just the amazing opportunities there are in the equine industry. But the key is you have to be motivated. You have to find your passion and be motivated. And then when there's blocks, it's sort of like horses, right? If you block any one of their natural behaviors, you're going to end up with problems. You're going to end up with, in all kinds of different ways they express it. Well, I really believe that in people too.
Mm-hmm. Well, what kind of background did you have with the horses prior to going to school? How involved were you?
Very little. So I was a horse crazy kid. My parents, when I was young, of course, I was, my very first drawing, I still have it. My mom kept it. My very first scribble drawing is a horse. I have it framed. It was that was, it came out with that. Crazy about it. Did not grow up on a farm, grew up in an agricultural community, but my dad was an engineer. My mom was a school teacher. I was just an animal crazy kid. They decided to take me to a dude ranch in Arkansas for a family vacation, and it was over. I mean, it was pouring rain, as long as they didn't cancel the riding the horses, my mom was out there in her raincoat. I mean, I was just every single moment, horses. And so then through high school, I, through just talking to people, who's got a horse, who can I ride? Who do you know? I'll clean stalls, I'll groom, just let me be around them kind of thing. So I think my friends knew I was horse crazy, but I was much more likely to pursue a degree in photography, or I played the flute. That was a big part of my, both of those things. So, it never occurred to me that I could have a career in horses. I just knew that's what I was crazy about.
So when you said that you were a tenured professor already when you went to get your doctorate, I think one of the things that probably keeps a lot of people from pursuing, degrees is the fact that they have to work and they think they don't have the time or the money to go to school on top of that. And we were wondering, what kind of options you think working people have to pursue higher education, and how do you navigate that with the cost and the expense of it versus having to make a living and pay your bills?
Yeah, very, very real issues of that. And even at a bachelor's degree level now, colleges, we certainly have a crisis when it comes to college expenses for sure. So for me, I think the key thing is making sure that you know what you're doing when you're going to school. So I think as an undergraduate, I always, encourage students to explore a variety of things, because that one class changed my life, right? That one professor. So I always encourage that. But if you already are employed, or have been employed and now you're not employed, right? Or you're in between and trying to figure those out, then going back to school has to be very purposeful. And so I already, I was secure. I had been there for, I forget how many years before I went to pursue my PhD. I already had a pretty, I figured things out in terms of my classes and my committee work and my organization and stuff. And so you sort of just have to pick and choose. I mean, any hands-on stuff with horses totally went away. My time was not spent doing that kind of stuff. So whatever free time or recreational time I would have had, the switch for that was college coursework. But I also, picked away at it. In fact, I took classes in a couple different degree programs at a couple other colleges before I decided what I really was going to do my PhD in, just to test it out. What's a course here and a course here? And then for the most part, I took 2 courses in my PhD work a semester, and then did my research. So the timing there in terms of any balance is, you got to give something up to push that in. So it has to be worth it enough that you don't resent it.
Yeah.
And interesting enough that you're motivated for it.
Right. And I think, if people research enough, there's a way to look into scholarships or grants or financing in a way that it won't put you completely in debt. I think that's such a concern.
It is. And so that's part of that balancing piece is you've got to be realistic, because there's an awful lot of people, if you look at the PhD piece, there's an awful lot of people that get to what's considered ABD, which is all but dissertation. So they do all their coursework, but they never do their dissertation. And so you've really just thrown away money. I mean, you're just hanging out there. So and the dissertation is a place that requires the most self-motivation.
Yeah.
So, and even with a master's degree, I mean, the nice thing now, and I think COVID again has really changed so much of it, is there are many online options. Right. The downfall of that is you need to be really careful about which online options you choose. Right. What is the purpose? How much value is in that degree? Is it from a reputable place? What kind of support are you going to get? So, gets a little, it can get a little bit iffy out there. But from a graduate program, I have any number of students who got their bachelor's degree when I was a professor, and then have gotten probably the MBA, it's probably one of the most popular ones from what our curriculum was. And, you can take a course or 2 at a time. So it's, it's planning those things out. And before long, you're there. You just have to start. And any number of places now, again, depending on what kind of area you're in, but if you're in like a nutrition or pharmaceutical position, or something that's in a more traditional kind of business position versus hands-on, you may find that there are not only scholarships available, but your employer may be willing to offset some of that or reduce some of your load, because professional development is the skills you're getting should in fact enhance the position that you're doing.
Right. It's interesting you say that, because when I worked at Blue Chip Farms, I did a lot of the pharmaceutical stuff, like medicating the babies. When the vet would say, okay, this one needs SMZs for 5 days, like I would make sure that it was being taken care of. If I didn't do it myself, then at the barn, and make sure that they had all the drugs and everything. So at one point I had thought, oh, well, should I go back to school and become a vet tech, and pursue doing that? But when I sat back and looked at what kind of value, like I was making very good money, and it really wasn't going to add anything more to what I would make at Blue Chip. So it was like, well, is this going to serve me going forward into a different industry or what? So I really had to have that conversation with myself, because I would have enjoyed going back and doing that, but it would have put a lot of stress between my job. I probably would have had to give up riding. And so I made that choice not to. And it didn't hurt me, but like, I do think that people need to have a conversation with themselves about, is it going to add value to what they're doing?
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Absolutely. That value added, not just chasing the degree. And there's a lot of certifications you can get to, not just chasing the certificate. And also looking at alternate routes. So for example, of any number of former students that wanted to do the vet tech thing, and they went to Florida or Kentucky, where you don't have to have a vet tech license to do that work, but they needed that equine science, and they had management too, which is, wonderful compliment. And they were in a place where moving, wasn't an issue. So, it is really important to, especially when you're going back to school, to really think about, what is the market? What would I do? How much of a difference would this really make?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that that education is valued enough in the equine industry?
So where I get caught off is the valued and the enough part. I think knowledge is valued. I think that skills are valued. I think hard work is valued. So in higher education, the goal, the end product, is a student who is graduating with more of that than they entered in. And, having done that for 28 years, the change in students from a freshman to a senior, and at one point we just had a 2-year degree program, but the change in the 4 years, remarkable. So different, so different. And I think that's where people don't necessarily think enough about what a degree is.
Right.
We do want that degree to pay off in the job and do that, but it's about life. It's about
becoming an adult.
Right. Becoming an adult. I mean, I have often used the analogy that it's a driver's license for life, that you get your driver's license and you're not an expert driver at all, but I'm going to trust you a lot more on the road than if you didn't have it. And some people are going to be speed demons and some people are not. They're going to have, different expertise level. But from employers to a T, when I talk to them about they want a hard worker who understands, can think critically, can problem solve on their feet, can communicate both verbally and written, and is trustworthy. So part of getting a degree is you had to show up to class. You had to do these things. You had to, you had to hit these marks. You had to do that stuff. And along the way, you had people that said, no, that's not good enough. You got to go and do it again. And we're going to push you really hard to do that. And you got to show up the next day if you want to, continue on. And that's what I think people really value. And that's what you get from a good college education.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the, like you said, the motivation and the self-reliance, and the only one who can make it happen and make it successful is you. And your parents aren't there making sure you get up for school every morning and making sure you do your homework. So I think that's the biggest part of the college experience. And I think from there, I don't know if higher education in a lot of the industry jobs is valued. I don't think it's put as its importance isn't as high as it would be in other industries, like in finance and business and that sort of thing.
Are we seeing any trend though towards employers liking to see college and like riding, working horse experience going into the equine industry? Have you seen that at all? Like where they're trending more towards wanting both versus just somebody who's not going to go to college at all and comes with experience?
Yeah, I certainly did in all the years that I was there. And then of course now I intersect a lot with employers and former students and, people that are looking for things. And I definitely, in the time that I was doing job placement with students, it was definitely a switch over, and more it was they specifically wanted someone with a 4-year degree. Now, interestingly, I'm not so sure that it mattered what the degree was. I want a horse person with a degree. I want a degree, and it's about the skills. So, the equine industry is the most multidisciplinary industry that there is out there, as far as I'm concerned. You can combine horse with anything, and find a career path. And if you're, if you're a hard worker and you know how to get things done, what employers would typically say is, "That's what I want. I can teach them those other things." Employers, I'm not sure, maybe once or twice in my 28 years of placing students did I get somebody that called and wanted a writer. I mean, they don't want the writers. They've got a business and they're looking for somebody to, grooms were pretty common. And I think people underestimate what a groom means. I mean, grooms are, they're essential. And you all those things that come with a college degree in addition to the horse skills. So that's probably what I'd hear more often is that college degree gives them a baseline of knowing that they're going to come with these essential skills and then teach them the other stuff, and then you get into specific industries. So do pharmaceutical and nutraceutical and nutrition companies. Yeah. And on the bachelor's, they typically, are interested in a a student that also is thinking about a master's degree. So in those fields, absolutely, more so. And what I would always say too is you don't want not having a degree to be a barrier to something. And I think somewhere along the line, when I hadn't yet decided what I was going to do with my PhD in, but I knew I wanted to do that. I had a group of 4 women who were strong female mentors of mine at the college that I was at, who pulled me aside, took me to lunch and said, "You get that PhD. You get it." Because they had all in their later years been in positions where they could have done some other stuff, but they didn't have the PhD.
Interesting.
And they didn't want that to happen to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get a little verklempt thinking about it. I mean, they were strong women, and that really, I was going to anyway, but that gut instinct of there's another reason, So not having the bachelor's degree, I think, is a hindrance, especially when you look at transferability. So a person who is a great horse person, but they don't have those other skills. And I'm, math, science, literary, all these kinds of things that come into it. If they get hurt, if they get injured, they think this is what they want to do. There's not this other piece over here. But when you get a bachelor's degree, it opens up so many things. And people don't necessarily realize that only about 1/3 of the US population has a bachelor's degree.
Really?
Yeah, only like 1-something%. I haven't looked at the statistics in the last 5 years, but it's like less than 2% have a PhD. So you're setting yourself apart, even just by getting that bachelor's degree and then the master's and then the PhD, you're opening yourselves up to places too, for which that's either you already have, it's not a barrier, what your level of education is. And it also means that you're coming in and you have this other thing with it. Back to the horse skills versus the life skills. I have had experiences where people who have been really involved in the horse industry, or they think they've been really involved in the horse industry, feel like they know everything there is to know. Where college, my mantra was always be a sponge, not a rock, right? So if you're coming in with more of a critical understanding that you don't know everything and your job is to continue to learn, then I think that's a difference too, that the bachelor's degree brings versus the not doing that.
Right. And so many people understand that with horses, you're always learning. Like you never know everything about horses or, riding and things like that. So I think that applies there too.
Yeah. And there's so many ways now, I talk a lot about the bachelor's degree and the traditional trajectory, but when we talk about debt load and things like that, I think we've also got to come back and realize that there's a whole lot of technical skills and expertise that you can get in good ways now, that can either become full-time jobs or can be secondary or tertiary jobs. I mean, I think the other part about the horse industry is, I'm going to look at the four of us on the screen. Many of us do many things. We don't just do, one thing. And so diversification is also, an important part. Are you set up to add another business, to add another consulting, to add another income line or another income stream? And there's a lot of ways to do that through some of the certificate programs or certifications.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think that's really interesting, because I always thought about, going into college, it was like a box, right? You can do this, you can do this, you can do this. And I think that now people can kind of customize it a little bit more, especially with those certification programs, so that they can do things on the side and have more ability to learn more and just gain more experience. And you're not in a box. Like, I mean, I sell insurance, horse insurance, and I'm a pharmaceutical rep and we do the podcast. And so I think that people need to realize too, that it's not just a box and you're, only going to go and do this, that you can open up doors by doing it.
Yeah. How awesome is that?
Right.
Yeah.
And what would your advice be, for someone just entering college versus someone who's already graduated and looking, for that master's or PhD? What would you say to them? And, how would it vary from, a young person to someone who's already been working for a while?
Yeah, good question. The young person entering, to me, college is about figuring things out, figuring out what clicks for you in terms of career potential. And so taking a variety of things, having a trajectory of what you want to do coming in. But, I'd say that if you ask, there was studies out there, it's been too long since I've looked at it, but, the majority of people are not doing in their career what they got a degree in.
Yeah.
And people will say, well, then that was wasteful. I'll say, no, it's not, because the college degree, as much as we think it's about to get you a job, it's really to make you employable and a good citizen, right? Not to get a blank job. So I think that every once in a while, I would have a student who would come in and say, X is what I want to do, and I'm going to follow that trajectory, and they graduate and they're doing it and they love it. I'd say more often, students take a variety of things and they realize, wow, okay, I had to take that accounting class for my, my equine degree, my equine management degree. Man, I actually really liked that. They want to do accounting or finance. They still get their degree, but then afterwards they realize they want to, sit for the CPA or do something like that. Or, wow, I really like that psychology class. Well, that's awesome for teaching lessons and being, PATH certified or any of the other things out there. But they might also decide they want to go in and do social work or, masters of social, there's so many things. Wow, they really liked teaching. They liked that education class, whether they combined it or they switched over, or in instances went on and got their master's in it. Because master's is where you specialize. Bachelor's is really supposed to be, a little more wide open. So I think that's a time to do that, and hopefully they are planning appropriately at that time for what they can and can't pay, and getting that getting that degree path. The other thing that would be really critical in that process is that they persist to graduation. Ideally, they don't switch colleges. You can switch majors within a college and oftentimes still graduate within 4.5 years. But boy, it's a big money dump every time they change a college or change a major degree. So those would be my advice for the undergraduate. for graduate, I think you got to know why you're going to school. You got to be specific. And you have to have done your homework to know where that's going to get you. So like you were saying, Connor, the what is the, you gain and lose with every choice you make. So what are you gaining by doing it? And what are you giving up by doing it? And what's really going to matter with that? And then cost, has to play in there as well, accessibility. Mm-hmm. And then I would say, because there's a lot of online options now, and I think a lot of good online options, but I also think that there's some not great online options that, you really have to look carefully at those things.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's any specific degrees that lend themselves to the equine industry?
I do. I think the good all-around degrees are equine that has a science emphasis or equine that has a business emphasis. I think that those are probably two of the sort of natural splits. And usually, even in a business emphasis, you're going to get some science, and in a science emphasis, you're going to get some business. So I think that those are well-suited, general and broad. Then you get into the specific specializations of what kind of programs are out there. So there are places that you can go and they have a really strong breaking and training program, or they have a really strong human therapeutic kind of program, or they have a really good equine therapeutic program. Those are wonderful if you know that that's exactly what you want to do, because those are going to tunnel you in more. So the two thoughts then are the good general broad that lets you explore and you can do lots of things with it, very versatile, but you're not specialty in one thing. Mm-hmm. Then there's the ones that you're a specialty in one thing, but you're not going to get as much of that general broad base and potential transferability or movement into other areas. So I think that those ones that are the more specialty they're more challenging for me to see students in, because they have to really be able to feel like that is the thing that they want to do. And I'm always finding new things I want to do, or thinking about things I want to do. And so for me, the versatility and the transferability are pretty key. But again, depending on what institution it is, you may be able to couple a more what I call specific career track with a general degree. And now, any number of colleges have things like a 2+2 program, or a 4+1 program, or, in your 4 years, you can also get X, Y, and Z. And so I think that those, looking enough to see what the options are is good. And I'll make a plug here. One of the links that I sent you, Connor, is a link to the Equine Education Network, which is something that my husband and I run with the Equus Foundation. And it's a free searchable database of all the equine offerings across the U.S. And it gives you both geographically and then, what kinds of things they offer and what their degree programs are and their specialties. And the reason that we have that is because we just so strongly believe that students and their families need to be able to easily access what all the options are, because one equine degree is not the same as another equine degree. And being able to really compare and contrast, just like you would for a math major or an English major. The equine has been a little more hidden, right? It's sort of like, well, where does it belong and how do you find it? Looking at those and being systematic, and then seeing where alumni have gone and what we've done is pretty important.
That's really interesting. I was also just thinking about this, how we had a couple of veterinarians on recently and how they were talking about how they got no business in school. Meanwhile, we have these equine business programs out there, and it's like interesting that they're not getting any of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had some conversations about that as well. Talking about side gigs, I was a SCORE mentor for a while. SCORE is a free mentorship program
Right.
to help. And I've had veterinarians who said, well, we saw that you were a PhD and you had equine background and you understood animal science. And then I do a lot of business planning and business stuff as well. And came to that. I mean, to me, business is such a good base. So I'm, when we, the institution that I was at, when we were moving to a bachelor's degree program, I believed and we built, and I still believe that business, in my mind, is a great coupler, because what isn't business?
Right.
There.
Yeah. I know I actually went into college for psychology, and then I switched majors to business because I knew that I wasn't going to want to go through school so long. And I was like, what is the next best thing? So I did marketing and management. And then I didn't realize that they had a whole sports administration program. And that was like a really cool thing to find and minor in. I wish I had known about it before I went to school, because I probably would have majored in something like that, because I like sports, but it also completely applies to the equine industry, because look at all these big venues that they need people to run. And that was basically what those courses were about.
Yeah. Yeah, another great example. And you don't know what you don't know, right? Mm-hmm. So by looking at that, things like marketing and promotion, social media, not only sports management, huge, a whole nother part of it, but things like the tourism trade and hospitality management. I mean, again, what can't you combine? So I also think for students looking and families looking at colleges to see not only what they have with their equine offerings, but what other complementary kinds of things are out there. So it's not about choosing one or the other, but it's about coupling. Where can I, dig in a little? And sometimes you can get a double major, you get a major, you can get a minor, and then the versatility and the transferability is even larger.
Yeah, I think those are some great programs that you just mentioned, and also things like being trainers like athletic trainers and getting degrees in physical therapy, because I think those are all things that relate to the equine industry, and they might be overlooked. I know I certainly didn't think about it, but those are all things now that I look back, I'm like, oh, I totally could have done that. I would have loved to do that or be involved in that. And it's not just about like the horse, but it's about, other jobs related that keep you in it. I mean, look at all of the high profile riders that have gotten hurt that need good physical therapists, and you understand their needs more than most people would, than just somebody who went to school to be a physical therapist. Right.
Absolutely.
So I like
how crazy all horse people are and need to get back on the horse and don't listen to doctor recommendations.
Right.
And that's why it's helpful to have a doctor or a sports psychologist or a sports therapist that actually speaks horse, because they, again, all these specialty niches. So one of the big things that I've pushed all through my career, and when I do talks at places and, articles and these things, is that you don't have to give up the horse. And I so worry from the future of our industry perspective that we get these great kids that come up through the youth and then they go to college. And as you said, it's like open up a catalog, pick a major, there goes the horses, unless you're studying horse. But there's no reason to leave it behind. There's so many ways you can apply it, whether that's right away when you graduate, or you kind of, you still have that in your mind. And after you grow, you're more established and you say, I'm going to do a specialty area in this, or I'm going to reach out, to this audience, because while I'm an architect, I'm also a horse person. While I'm this, I'm also a horse person. This, I'm also a horse person. And don't we just love talking to other horse people? You just get it in a way, and you think about it differently. And so I can connect with you in a way that you couldn't otherwise, but I'm primarily, doing it from a counseling or a therapy or a building your structure or, helping you through an injury.
Yeah. I think probably a lot of our listeners are, have already gotten their bachelor degree or, have started businesses or working in business. And if they were to go for a master's program, what do you think is kind of the most useful, for older, well, we'll say women. I think the vast majority of our audience is women, but, for older women that, either want to make a career change or think that a master's might, help them get, better salary or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you gauge, what would be the most helpful?
So again, it's got to come back in my mind to the reason for it. If somebody currently, so I'll use an example. I have someone who just reached out to me maybe 2 days ago, who's an alum of mine, been out of the industry for quite some time, trying to figure out, come back in. Do they need to, should they get a master's? What should they do? And I always start, well, why do you think you need that degree? What is it that you're trying to do and break into? Because if they already have a bachelor's degree, if they don't have any horse skills at all, and so they love horses, but they want horse skills, a master's isn't going to help them. So you have to think about, what that is. Just getting a degree to get a degree doesn't make sense unless it's for your own self-confidence. And then it makes total sense. If you just want to have that, then by gosh, do it, as long as you can afford it and as long as it, it makes sense in that. But there's lots of other ways. Again, if you've already had that bachelor's degree and now you want to come back in, besides the master's, I think that if you're going to come back in and you want to get a master's degree, probably the most frequent places I would see that is a gateway. In other words, you need to have it to get in. Would be you want to do something in nutrition or pharmaceutical sales. You want to, and I shouldn't make sales. It's really customer service. It's really about teaching, advocacy. Then I think the Masters of Science gets you back in so you can read the technical journals. You know those things. You understand about research. That makes total sense. And I would say you got to do that. That would really make a difference. And then there's on the business side. So a master's of business, but you're going to get a general master's, and it could be an MBA in marketing. It could be an MS in marketing. But what is it that you're missing that you don't currently have that you think the master's is going to get you? Or is it that what you really need to do is go and work someplace, for a while and do this. So to me, it's more of a conversation about what is it that you're missing that you think the master's is going to do? And then where should you get that degree that makes the most sense and how to make the most out of your coursework? So you've got to be active. Right. In that education process, as opposed to what are they going to give to me? It's what are you going to make of it?
Do you think a master's is beneficial for a small business owner in order to be able to run their business better? Or is that too hard of a question to answer because it's so individual?
No. I think there are so many great options now that are free or low cost for small business owners to improve their business skills. I would right away be doing SBA and SBDC. So SBA is the Small Business Association and SBDC is the Small Business Development Centers. They're pretty much in every state and every community out there, and they're largely totally free to utilize services. But then they have a number of courses and things like that, and that you can connect with, and you can take courses on business planning, management, HR development. So my gut reaction would be first to do that piece. If you wanted to, for example, get into grant writing, then maybe, for a small business, if you were not for profit, maybe that would make a difference. So I don't think there's a general blanket statement. Usually the MBA is more for, I see it less from a small business and how can I progress than I do for you're in a particular trajectory. Now, having said that, I'm going to totally go the opposite direction and say that education in general changes you. And so the master's degree will largely make you develop your thinking skills and your problem solving skills and seeing the universe in a bigger place. And you will largely, if you're a small business owner and get an MBA, realize there's a host of other things you could be doing or ways to generate revenue and do all of that kind of stuff. So if you are a lifelong learner and you're saying, I want to constantly know how I can grow and expand my business and reach new audiences and do new things, then I would say an MBA could be really worth it.
Mm-hmm.
So does that make sense?
It does.
It's really about the purpose and why are you doing it? I mean, I'm totally about, lifelong learning. And amazingly, we live in a world now where you can access a lot of things without having to do a master's, but they're not the same.
Mm. Yeah. And the skills needed to accomplish them aren't the same.
Right.
Yeah.
And in a master's degree program, you're getting professors, you're getting advisors, you're getting somebody who's going to push you critically. If somebody comes to me to help, and they want me to help them, analyze a business plan or write a business plan, I'm just a mentor. I'm not their educator. Right? There's something very different about that, right? So I'm going to encourage and give some stuff, but that's very different than me, coming back as a teacher and saying, this is not correct. There's other ways to do that. Let's think more broadly. So you're also in that dollar that you're paying, you're getting someone who's going to push you to think differently.
It's interesting. I know 2 veterinarians that actually went back and got their MBA, and they're in the pharmaceutical industry. And I think that it's, they have a different perspective about things now. So they look at it like a vet, but they also look at it like products for product development and marketing them. And they have a very different approach to it from vets, some of the vets that I've worked with who don't have an MBA. Like they're really thinking about it as being a business.
Yeah. So that's a great example of a purposeful coupling. You're a veterinarian, but you're missing your business skills, and you know how much that will enhance your business to do that. Just like I think that some people who are vet techs and a business together can be really good, because then not only are you helping with the vet tech side, but you're also able to do the business side. So that's because it changes your way of thinking. That's what education is supposed to do. It's to broaden and enhance.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And there are, things there, as you mentioned, grants and scholarships. And because we are a largely female audience, and that's true in the horse industry, there are any number of women-owned business grants. So if you are a small business owner, a number of them will support higher education and scholarships that are specifically, and also for change of trajectory. So the older female, the female who's had changes and going on. So those are all great things and to be tapping into and looking at.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that was really useful information that I think a lot of people can take and help them make decisions for whether they pursue higher education or not. So we really appreciate that. And at the end of every episode, we ask the same 4 questions to each guest, and Connor starts with the first.
What is one action that women can take to make a big difference in their lives?
Great question. I would say both pay it forward and reach back. So looking at people that are mentors or people that could be mentors, finding those people and, saying, hey, I really admire you. I'd like to sit and have a talk. I'm trying to do X, Y, and Z. And then as paying it forward piece is that you as a female do that you say yes to those, and that you also look back at people that are coming up and or maybe struggling or trying to break into something and really do that. You never gain, you really gain when you help. And it's a two-way street, and you'll learn something new about yourself while you're helping other people.
And what is the best habit that keeps you motivated personally?
I'm always thinking about how can I leave the world a better place? And that may sound very don't know what's the word, unattainable or something. But I grew up with that mentality. My parents always said, this is our job, leave, whether it's the place you're sitting at right now or whether it's the universe, leave the place better than you found it. And so I'm very philanthropic in that way. And most of my work in the past, and certainly my work now, is all about, I'm motivated to see how I can help and see how I can improve and weigh whatever I'm doing. So that's what motivates me.
Great. That's nice. What's your favorite horse movie?
Yes, I was thinking about this. So the first one that comes to mind is oh my gosh, it just went in and out of my head. Lady Hawk. So Lady Hawk, you may not think of as a horse movie, but it was a movie that really had a big impact on me. So I encourage you to look at that. And then Champions would be next. And then that was a movie quite some time ago and really good. And then the last is Seabiscuit. And I watched Seabiscuit the night before I went in to have my littlest kiddo. So horses sort of started with me when I was young with Lady Hawk, and then have carried me throughout. So, and they're largely about horses changing people's lives. So.
And well, what I love about it is whenever I ask that question, we hardly ever get one response. Like people like you, there's like two or three, or they'll be like, "Oh my God, this is it."
It's hard.
No, but this one too.
I know, for different reasons.
Yep.
But yeah, Lady Hawk turned me on to Frisians. I never knew about Frisians before, and just something pretty awesome. So
cool. And who would you recommend to be a future guest on this podcast?
So I can't just give one name either.
That's fine. We like lots of suggestions.
I'll give you two. I know. So the first is Rebecca Gemens, who I just finished doing a technical large animal equine rescue awareness program with her. She's pretty phenomenal. I think she has a lot to offer about women in business and breaking some barriers and doing all that. And then the other is Deanna Mancuso, who has Lucky Orphans, which is a horse rescue, and has a business model that I think a lot of people could learn from, about how you think differently about what you're doing in nonprofits and the importance of really knowing your community.
Great. Interesting. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We really enjoyed talking to you and learning more about, what you do and how education can help people in our industry and hopefully help some of our listeners too.
Great. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Appreciate all you do.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You too.
I really liked talking to Karin today. And she, I think, gave a really balanced view of how education can help. Obviously a bachelor's she feels is really important, as do I. But also, looking at beyond that in a master's and a PhD. And I really loved her advice of making sure that it's purposeful and that there's a reason for you doing it. Instead of just saying, oh, I need a master's just to have a master's. It's, how is it going to help you? How is it going to propel you in your career? Or how is it going to help you become a better person? I thought that was really interesting and great advice.
Yeah, I think that, not being wasteful, because it is expensive to do it. So make sure that it's something that you want to do and it is going to bring something to you. I think, like I said in it, I had to make that decision about, going back to become a vet tech and getting that degree, or if it was going to add value to my job. And, ultimately I figured out it wasn't going to add to my job at the time. But, I feel like this is something that so relates to like what we're trying to get across, right? Like there's so many different things that you can do in the equine industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like she gave some great advice on some other degrees or programs that, we could do. I think that was a nice part of our chat with her about, science and business, but also, you can be an architect and be a horse person and mm-hmm. have it relate to the industry.
For sure. And, for either young people or people who want a change of career. I think it's good advice and how they can, use education to help them make decisions and guide where they want to go in their career.
Yeah. And it's not, I like too that employers are kind of asking, they want a degree in something, that they're, realizing there is growth that has to be done. And I think that was a major part of it, because I think sometimes people are like, oh, well, it's expensive and why would I go to school? Well, you're going to grow as a person, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to figure out how to do all the things yourself. And those are life skills. That's not just like school skills. And that's not just, to get a degree. Those are things you're going to carry with you. I mean, so many young people I know who are under 18 before they go to school, they have no idea how to do time management. And you think, like, you look at them and you're like, oh my gosh, are they even going to make it through school? Like, they have to show up for class, right? And they do. And it's like really important.
Right. And I think learning about consequences and,
yes.
The consequences for your action and taking responsibility for what you do, because, other people aren't going to do it for you.
Yeah, absolutely. A responsibility part of it. And one thing that I really, really liked what she said at the end was about paying it forward and reaching it back.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about paying it forward a lot because do you remember when we were in college and we went to see Coach Moore made us go see that movie? I don't know if everybody went, but I know
the
Pay It Forward movie. Yes.
Yes.
And I always think about that because that was like a pretty impactful thing in school. And like that Coach Moore was the one who sent us to watch it. But then also like reaching back, because, it goes both ways.
Totally. And I mean, I have people reach out to me a lot just to talk about the industry and my job and what I do. And they just want to hear about it, to see if they think they might be interested in that, or, like a lot of it is, young women, either late high school or college or just graduated, and what's the next step and that sort of thing. So, I do a lot of phone calls with people to talk about it. And, but I find that it helps me too, in being able to talk about it and talk through it with people. And I hope it makes an impact for someone else too.
Yeah. I mean, basically that's what we want to do, is be impactful.
Mm-hmm. Make a difference. So
absolutely,
it helps a little bit.
Yeah. Well, we're running out of time for today, so we're going to wrap up, and you can find the links to today's guests and the show notes at www.eqbusinesswomen.com. Equestrian B2B is out twice a month on the 1st and the 15th.
So you can find out more at eqbusinesswomen.com, and please follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And you can find the Equestrian B2B podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And when you're there, be sure to follow, subscribe, and leave us a review so other people can find us too. You can have all 20 plus shows of the Horse Radio Network with you wherever you go with their free app for iPhone and Android. Go to your app store and search Horse Radio Network.
Now go pursue your education.